people understand that there's an answer, there's a way. We the people have to say. So send the orders to prepare, that we the people do declare. Send the good news, send the word, we the people will be heard. We the people everywhere.
Ending poverty. One of the two most important things that we have to address. What will it take to get us to remember those two things? It's poverty and it's racism. I'm your host, Lou Ismay. Welcome to DN News in Review. Important things in the news. The United Nations has slammed the United States. Why? Well, police brutality, torture, the way we treated the child migrants who still come to our country, although perhaps not in the large numbers that did a few months ago. And we got slammed on Guantanamo Bay. People cleared for clearance. No country to accept them. 6 recently. Our Congress refusing to let these people come into our country where they can be kept in maximum prison facilities, and they're under some control, costing far less money and treating them much more fairly than they've been treated so far. So the United Nations Commission Against Torture has spoken. Torture by the CIA report has been, a congressional report, a Senate report, has just recently been released. Denials on the part of the CIA. But the entire world has known about things before we, because our media is well controlled. TV, radio, newspapers, magazines. It's only through investigative magazines and organizations do we have any idea what's been going on, what is still going on. Do we want to be known as a torture nation? Years ago, at least 70 or 80 years ago, whatever the time frame, the German military knew the best way to get people to talk. Make friends with them. Treat them reasonably well. Not the cruel punishment that we have subjected our prisoners to. Friendship, great people just speaking, inadvertently release information. A smart interrogator pieces these together. Are we aware? Do we care? What shall we do? Another thing in the news, very recently, we have an actual idea of the number of people that are killed by the use of our drones seeking to kill a terrorist leader. The information was spoken about by an attorney named Jennifer Gibson. She works with the organization known as well, that's forgotten. Anyway, she wrote a book, You Never Die Twice. And what is she referring to? She's referring to the information that Reprieve has put together. One instance, we killed about 28 unidentified people to kill one target. And Reprieve, the organization that she works with, has discovered that ratio applies as a pattern. Sometimes we try unsuccessfully, make 3 attempts or more to kill one person. So we make an attempt, it fails, we're still losing about 28 unidentified people on an average. Try again, we fail, there's still a large number of people killed. Try it again the third time, it's still people killed. So what shall we do? These drones cannot respond instantly to changes of information because the signal has to travel thousands of miles. So it's several seconds. Let's say the drone operator flying out of Hancock airfield near Syracuse, let's say that more information comes in. Wrong target and so forth. The drone is programmed, orders cannot be changed because just physical impossibility due to the distances involved, several thousand miles. When will we learn? When will we learn that our conduct and the effects on people elsewhere in the world blows back against us? Ultimately, we suffer at some point. And lives are at stake, not just the lives of the people who've been killed through these actions, but the lives of our military. If not now, the retribution when it comes, not if it comes, when it comes, will be horrific. We capture people, we send them to other countries for torture so that we can say we're not torturing anybody. We're not admitting that people are being tortured on our behalf. We just say we don't torture people. But the rest of the world, to repeat, knows what's been going on. And we, who should know first, are learning last. Something that we should be aware of. You know, this is a good time, perhaps, to remind ourselves the kind of people we are, what we have become. This is a cartoon that was handed to us. It's from the internet. Just let's look at it. We want dirty air and water so CEOs can make more money. Send our jobs overseas. Stop giving us benefits from our tax money. Give our forests to the timber companies now. Yes to costly health care. The highest in the world, by the way. Please tap our computer messages. The worst in the world. Limit our internet freedom, which people are trying to do. Pave our farmlands. No laws for industry. Don't tell us what's in our food. More celebrity news. Give us E. coli burgers. Here, let's just take another quick look at the bottom of this thing. The American people have spoken. we speak very well with our silence, our inability, or the desire not to get involved with politics. We have a saying in our country, politics dirty. Politics, if not working well, should be addressed, shouldn't it? Shouldn't we somehow, even if we have to force ourselves by law to vote, would be better than no voting at all? Their estimates are, word on the street, things will change in January. What can happen? Further deprivation of money for public schools as part of a campaign to privatize our schools. Help, like food stamps, going to be cut. Medicare benefits, cut. All in an attempt to cut the budget. The idea of less government is best, which means privatization is better. Do we realize that if people don't speak up, that things that will not benefit the country as a whole, the middle class, the poor, those kinds of things that hurt the middle class and the poor will become normal activities. So, what shall we do and what will we learn? Another important item in the news. A dark moment in Egypt. Hosni Mubarak, former leader, ordered or allowed the killing of thousands of people, at least 1,000, but more with you count the wounded, the maimed, who were protesting what was going on in that country. 100 or more years of a judicial system that worked well, damaged, eliminated. Mubarak is now free. Well, he's still in custody. He's at a military hospital, but he's free to go out as soon as this political situation settles a little bit. That's the news. So that's a dark moment. We have some dark moments in our country. The dark moment that's captured our attention and the news is the way that we treat people, the justice system. It came to a head as a result. Ferguson, the killing of a black young man by a white police officer, and the chokehold killing, labeled a homicide, by the way, by the medical examiner, an officer, and the men who helped him, and are free, no charges. What's been going on? If we take a look at the news over the last week or two, we find that people are speaking up. Summarize an unjust system, a judicial system that is broken, racism, politics, various ways condemning our judicial system, the way the police operate. One man named Vince Warren, an attorney, much experience with the system, sort of summarizes everybody's comments. Al Sharpton and other people prominent in the world. And this is what Warren says. He titled the title of an interview on Democracy Now! Was How Police Officers Get Away with Killing from Ferguson to New York City. And to summarize some of these, Warren is the executive director of the Center for Constitutional Rights, a very important organization. The evidence in both cases, Ferguson and Staten Island, the grand jury did not indict. What the prosecutor did, prosecutors are required, and they do seek an indictment. There's a saying, a prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich. They work at convincing the grand jury, when it's convened, that something is wrong just by presenting the evidence. In this case, all the evidence was laid out, and the prosecutor in both cases said, well, you guys figure it out. That's not the role of a prosecutor. Perhaps the best thing to do is always, when a police officer is involved in something that's questionable, killing or whatever, an independent prosecutor should be appointed. Why? Because the prosecutor and the police work hand in hand. The police get the evidence. They stand before the grand jury and give witness. And the prosecutor takes that information and then seeks an indictment. And there is a court that convenes, or is convened, and then the proceedings of the court decide. The jury decides. It's very difficult. The livelihood of the prosecutor depends on the cooperation of the police. Should that system be questioned, the police cooperate with the prosecutor. So we've learned, if we didn't know before, we've learned again that black lives don't matter. When a corpse, a black man in Ferguson, is left on the ground face down for 4 hours or so, whatever the time was, is that showing respect? In Staten Island, when the man who was put in a chokehold, lying there, not responsive, when the medical people arrive, the emergency medical people do nothing, make no attempt at resuscitation, no oxygen or anything else. Just look around, just stand there talking. Does that show respect for another human being? If it were a white person, would that happen? If it was a white person lying in the street, their corpse, would that body be taken away? Can't we look at this thing with justice and integrity and a sense of decency? What has been going on? Are we giving our consent through our silence? Do we rely only on a small group of people who are called activists, which is not a very decent term? We used to be called tree huggers. That wasn't a complimentary term. We used to be called by words that we don't use on the air, at least not on the public access. No one calling us to rethink our attitudes? Anyway, the words lack of accountability. Oh, and by the way, the police officer who applied the chokehold and all the ones who are complicit by holding the victim down were not going to charge. But the person who took the photographs of that occasion did get indicted. Imagine that. And his wife, both he and his wife, have been subjected, according to the interview on Democracy Now!, with harassment by the police. The police protect themselves, one another. That's not unusual. People who are in danger usually do that, and it happens in the corporate world. One person being protected by the others. But when it comes to justice, our entire nation was founded on the idea of justice. Wasn't it? Well, accountability is a key word. How will we come together? When will we come together? What shall we do? Think. The victims are blamed. The people who attempt to do the right thing, like Ramsey Orta with his photographs, being blamed, being indicted, probably a jail, the trial, and possibility jail. It's not unusual. Or do we have rose-colored glasses on that we don't see these things? Don't speak up? There's one group of women in the area that do speak up. Grannies for Peace. The Grannies rule. Now this is just taken off the internet to give you some idea. Here. The Grannies for Peace. They're out there at Colony Center on the intersection of Wolf Road and Route 5 periodically. War is not, never was, never will be a game. No war, no violent video games, no to toys which celebrate war. No to violent with video games, no to toys which celebrate war. No to war this Christmas and every Christmas. And just in case you think this is wild stuff, in the military, there is a term used as a theater of operations. It's the area where warfare goes on. The theater of operations is the Middle East, or the Europe, ETO, European Theater of Operations. Years ago, 70 some odd years ago, PTO, or Pacific Theater of Operations. So in a sense, it's a game. in a sense, it's violent. Very violent, isn't it? Do we think ever that what goes on in one generation is passed on psychologically to the next generation and on, could be 3 or 4 generations anyway? There may not be enough evidence available to us, or we haven't searched for it, but just think. A family. Dad, violent. Abusive. Real problems. Could be the job, could be anything. What do the children know when they grow up? They know violence. Will it affect them? Yes, in some way. Will they become parents someday? Yes, possibly, if they're lucky. Will any of the violence of the grandfather be passed on somehow to the grandchildren? Do we ever hear in a family, he's just like his grandfather, he's just like his father. His great-great-grandfather was that way too. Violence, the attitudes do get passed on. PTSD, more current. Yes, passed on to others in the family. Wives are speaking up more. Mothers are speaking up more. Children wondering, do we care? Does this mean anything? And another item on warfare. Why are the soldiers called boys? Come on, boys, time to go. Boys over the trenches. Boys in the foxholes. Boys in the submarines. Why? Because, in effect, our brains are not well enough developed to understand the effects of what we do. I do something, do I understand the effects? Our brains are not fully developed in that regard until we're at least 24, more likely nearer to 28. Girls much earlier, boys much later. So, think about it. There was information back about 70 some odd years ago, the invasion of Europe by this vast armada of ships carrying thousands of living souls to the beaches of Normandy. The saying, the conversation in the background with people taking time to talk about such things, that if those young men had known, they possibly would have not attacked those beaches. Because at those young ages, young men feel that they are invincible. We've all felt that way when we were younger. It's only after a few years, maybe we wait until we're about age 35, before we look ahead to the future and say, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? So, should we consider these facts regarding physiology and psychology and so forth in our plans to change for better for the future? How about discussing it? How about a debate? Some of us meet at the Moon and River in the Stockade area once a month. We choose to meet at 5 o'clock on the first Wednesday of every month. We at least talk about these things. Will we solve the problems of the world? Not likely. However, one really never knows. Never know where an idea gets picked up and carried on by those who think that's a great idea. So, let's get on with other news items. But, let's think. What are the effects of what we do as a nation, as a community? Because there are so many wonderful, wonderful things going on in the world, not in the news that we listen to every day or read every day. We have to look for it. It's difficult to find. Copenhagen, Denmark, for example, wants to be the first city to be carbon-free, or whatever the term is, a green city, with lanes for bicycles, with lights that dim, turn on, street lights, turn on when an automobile is coming or a vehicle is coming. When the vehicle has passed, the lights are dimmed. Wonderful ideas, just one example. In our country, people working together as co-ops, running a business very, very successfully. There are little things going on. Maybe we should find maybe we should devote an entire program to that. It would be interesting. We'll have to think about it. Anyway, a man died recently in New York City, noted for his work over 50 years of public service. Herman Badillo, the very first Puerto Rican man of color, first Puerto Rican Spanish heritage, elected to the Senate, passed on, highly respected man. Mr. Obama is picking a new defense minister. Head of office. Hagel's out of office, looking for a replacement. And there's a cartoon that's appropriate. We'll show that in a few minutes of comment on the seeking an appointment here. We'll do. Here it is, right here. So let's just show it. Defense Secretary wanted, seeking a qualified, motivated individual to take blame for our micromanaged security policies with no input from you whatsoever. Apply here. Maybe we could throw in more attractive fringe benefits. We need to know, remember, that the people who control our country are not in the White House, may not even be elected people. There are people who pay for the elections, the campaigns, the corporations that pay for the political campaigns. The combination. Are we knowledgeable? Do we care? Should we have campaign financing? Public money? No gift money? No support by corporations or organizations directly involved with, and sole purpose is to influence the election of public servants, as we call them. In Ecuador, a group of people, young people, going to attend a conference, the climate conferences that's going on now in Lima, Peru. Bus was, we could say confiscated, people stranded. Government of Ecuador didn't want them to be there to testify about drilling for oil in a nature preserve. Well, I'm just going through this root. The root of all of our problems, or a lot of our problems, is racism. And the other is poverty, because we've eliminated, first of all, we got thousands of people, even maybe hundreds of thousands of people looking for work, and there's no work for them to do. There's a movement for at least a living wage, $15 or $20 an hour. There are people who don't want to pay that, saying that they can't afford it, but the larger corporations can. And maybe something should be done, because when the wages are paid, there's money to spend. And when we eliminate the middle class, there's not enough money for people to spend. They cut back. The reason we were successful in the past was because people shared the wealth by earning more money. Once things went overseas, and we've talked about that in the past, that was one of the things that happened, and people lost their jobs. And Congress, decided not to do what was done during the Franklin Roosevelt years. Public money spent to repair bridges and roads, construct buildings, do all sorts of things, giving people work and earning money and spending that money. Not just the independent people get hurt by no successful working middle class, but so do the large corporations. International corporations can't succeed, but our country cannot successfully accomplish what needs to be accomplished when Congress is controlled by a few people who, as we called it, are too conservative, want to force their way. Local news, very, very good local news. Justice, finally. Henry Johnson. There's a statue in a little park there as you come off the I-90 and enter the city limits. A hero won the Croix de Guerre, the highest medal, and it was with a gold palm, which means that he was especially a hero to the French during World War I, single-handedly. When his rifle broke, because he was using it as a weapon, swinging it around, he was out of ammunition. When the stock of his weapon splintered, all he had was his bolo knife. He got his buddy out safe, saved the situation, deserving the Congressional Medal of Honor. Finally, it's going to be awarded to him if Congress now passes that, approves. Here's a photograph of him as a young man. He died in 1929, penniless. He was famous. He gave a speech in St. Louis at one time where his anger sort of overcame, and he really lashed out at the system in which he was forced to live and the discrimination as a black man. Even if he was a hero, there was still discrimination. And that kind of discrimination went on in the military until Truman changed that. No more segregated troops. But that legacy of discrimination, although it's changed a little bit, it's a little bit less flagrant, still exists. And we've just seen it in these tragedies in Ferguson and in Staten Island, New York. A couple more cartoons on that subject, and we'll go on to other subjects. This cartoon in our Albany Times Union, the names of the people who have been injured by the police actions, killed and so forth. It's a hell of a town. And that's got to change too, doesn't it? Okay. In this issue of Mother Jones News, we have a story that we haven't covered. We want to talk about it now. This goes back a couple of years, but this is really the killer app. The rare earths that power microcomputers make our lives easier, but just now, how toxic are the guts of your smartphones? Now, this is just one illustration of what we have before us here. Here's an automobile. Now, yttrium used in the sensors. Cerium, UV cut glass, keeping UV lights out. Lanthanum, zirconium, lanthanum, here. Names that we find difficult to pronounce. Never heard of them in high school, seldom in college, but these rare earths are toxic, and many of them come from parts of countries in Africa. You even look at the list for the color screen. Look at the list for the magnets and the vibrator. Look for the glass polishing, the speaker magnets, the circuit board electronics. Not everyday words, but we use them every day. These used pieces of equipment get sent elsewhere where health laws are not at all strenuous, and people reclaim that material, hazardous material. China has rare earth mines are clustered. Waste has leached into waterways and irrigation communities. This is a sentence right here that's important. Not coincidentally, the refining tends to happen in areas where weak environmental rules mean the companies can process elements on the cheap. Inner Mongolia. At any rate, here we go. At least 66 cancer deaths on leaked radioactive waste, just in one community. People complain that their hair and teeth have fallen out. You see, our way of life is dependent on people whose lives don't mean anything if they do, really don't mean anything. We have no idea what's going on. Only now are we becoming aware of the footprint, as it's called, the big footprint that we leave on Earth. And there's a reason it's been called and is called Mother Earth, because it gives life to every single one of us. And when we allow dirty air, dirty water, contaminated soil, we should at least try to hold ourselves accountable, shouldn't we? Other people are dying to keep us as we are with our very wonderful, almost magical life with computers and all sorts of good things. Who should be held accountable? Or what shall we do? And the big question is going on in Lima, Peru, and then at the next big conference that's coming up next year, that's when the fate of the world will be decided. How much are we willing to give up or modify so that others might live? So plants and animals that sustain us might live. Have we thought about it? Now, before we forget it, there are some events coming up. Reminder that the 8th step in Schenectady, the 3rd Thursday at 8:30 in the afternoon, is a jam session at Proctor's. It's held at the Rob Alley stage at Proctor's. 8th step. Something else coming up in Proctor's, I'll have to read this to you. Coming up on the 14th, coming weekend, Ann Hill and Michael Smith. Sunday, December 14th at 7 p.m., held in the Underground Theater. And the telephone number is 346 6204. 346 6204 for tickets. And while we at it, for those who plan ahead, on Sunday the 21st of December at the GE Theater at Proctor's, Kim and Reggie Harris and Magpie Sing Solstice program. 7 p.m. GE Theater at Proctor's, 21st. Old Songs has a winter program. It's coming up on Saturday, the 13th at 3 p.m. Noel, we clear. It's a pageant of midwinter carols. It's a very popular thing. It's going to be held at St. John's Lutheran Church in Altamont on Maple Avenue. It's the only church on Maple Avenue, so you can't miss it. The winter solstice, going back into history with songs. Very interesting, and as it's said, as people say nowadays, very fun. Here's a story from an earlier edition of the Yes magazine. What rich capitalists know. Nick Hanauer, venture capitalist, self-described plutocrat, says a healthy economy and and an effective democracy depend on a thriving middle class of workers who are the real job creators. Based on what we just had presented in the last few minutes and in the past and quite possibly in the future, the thriving middle class of workers. Now, let's jump back to approximately 1945, 46, 1950s, early 50s. There was something called the GI Bill of Rights. Billions of dollars spent. Education for military, people who served during World War II. Especially the military. The GI Bill of Rights. People educated, bachelor's degree, professional degrees, master's degrees, PhD, doctorate degrees of all kinds, MDs, all kinds of people, business people, educated at public expense, and that amount of money was the fuel for the middle class to grow and to prosper, and the entire country benefited, and benefited other parts of the world too. The word benefit is a key word. Now, there are many people, many very, very wealthy and profitable people who want to gut a public education system. And with the governor that we have, that could possibly happen in New York State. What are we doing? Are we complaining? Are we looking to find solutions? Are we complaining about the taxes? Look, listen. Look at history. See what went well and what didn't. And participate with some optimism, lack of fear for the future. If education at public expense has worked in the past in this country and is working well in other countries, then why are we not participating? Why are we not demanding enough money? Well, charter schools do work, but is a principal of a charter school, elementary school, worth more than $100,000? Well, some of them are earning more than that, a good deal more than that. Do we have to have our administrators? See, that's because the profits go to pay for those salaries, not the teachers' salaries, but for the salaries of those who run things. That's unfortunately the way things are. Maybe it has to be, but we don't want to philosophize on that this morning, or this afternoon, or this evening, whenever this program is aired in your neck of the woods. Can we talk about it? Can we think about it? Instead of just sitting and complaining. And can we get out and vote about the things instead of saying, I'm not going to vote this election. The next election is critical, 2016. What will we do? The die is cast as far as Congress is concerned, but what shall we do about the next election? It's a critical year. Especially remember that Stiglitz, the great economist, predicted that the U.S. empire will implode. 2016, 2018, somewhere in that period, could be 2020, but more likely not that long. Coming up soon, the critical year. Do we need military in countries around the world is one of the questions. What about the dominance on the world? What's it doing? How will we deal with climate situations? So many things ride on the next election. Now, call quick attention. We don't have time for another visual, but we want to just remind people that there was a rebellion once in our area. And it was a rebellion of farmers in the hill times. They had various kinds of horns. This is just one style. They blew the horn when the militia came up, when the sheriff's deputies came up to take their land, to force them off their land. The story is interesting, but the symbol is important. The symbol was a horn, blown when there was danger present. What will the horn be for what needs to be done? What will wake us up? Will it be a blast on the horn? Or some other symbol? Anyway, time to go. I've been your host, Lou Isner. Thank Glenn Jarrett for his ingenuity. Support the food pantries, the food bank, independent bookstores, and pay attention. Pay attention what's going on in the world and participate.
And the time has come for reason to be heard. The purpose of the people's what this declaration's for. It's why